Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Anderson's Flip Social Studies class. We're here today to learn about primary and secondary sources. You got myself, you got Yoda here. He'll be helping us out as well, maybe. He likes to shout off every once in a while. But today we're going to learn about primary and secondary sources. This is our first flip lesson. So we're going to kind of go through and figure out what we got to do. In order to understand primary sources, you got to answer some key questions. First being, what is a primary source? Two, what are examples of primary sources? Now, on your notebook, you might want to write these down on the side header for our note style and format, because we're going to do the Cornell notes. So primary sources. Primary sources are original records of specific historical periods. Okay, so basically anything that is original from history is going to be a primary source for you. They're produced by people who participated in and witnessed the past, and they offer a variety of viewpoints and perspectives of events, issues, people, and places. Those are the key things that you need to know about them. Most important thing to remember is they are used or created by someone with first-hand experience of the event. Some examples of primary sources, these ones are key, are audio, so things like oral histories or memoirs, interviews, or music even. Images, photographs, videos, film, fine art, those are all examples of primary sources. You have objects, clothing, tools, pottery, gravestones, inventions, weapons, memorabilia. And we have statistics, all those interesting numbers and data that we look at in social studies. Those are all examples of primary sources. And finally, the one that we'll use most likely is going to be text. This will be our dominant form of primary sources in class, but you're going to have letters, diaries, original documents, legal agreements, treaties, maps, laws, advertisements, recipes, genealogical information, as well as sermons and lectures. So let's take a look, see. This would be an example of a photograph, primary source. This would be something you'd use if you were researching Jackie Robinson. This would be an example of clothing. Okay, you can learn a lot from this piece of clothing, just basically looking at it and being able to hold it, analyze it. You can see that the quills or the beadwork there is all quills from porcupine. The hair is buffalo, the hide's buffalo, so you can basically get a good idea of how this tribe lived. Census data, these are all those numbers and things, charts, graphs. These are all primary sources for you. Okay, treaties. Okay, that would be the actual rough draft of, I believe, the Constitution. Okay, then you have this primary source on the right side here. If you take a look at it, you can tell when it was wrote. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty. That would be the Gettysburg Address, and this is Abraham Lincoln's actual handwritten document. Okay, so for tomorrow when you're in class, we'll basically discuss our primary sources as well as our secondary sources, which will be coming up. And then you guys will complete this portion of it for your assignment tomorrow in class with my guidance. For secondary sources, this will be pages 3 and 4 of your notebook. What is a secondary source? What are examples of a secondary source, and how do primary and secondary sources differ? Secondary source offers interpretations or analysis of primary source material. Secondary sources are basically secondhand accounts of historical events. So basically it's from somebody that didn't actually witness it, but they actually have studied it. They've studied the primary source documents, and they've basically wrote about it. Examples of secondary sources. You have textbooks, which we use. Reports. So if you guys wrote a report on the Civil War, you guys would be a secondary source. We have articles, so periodical articles, things like in Sports Illustrated, those would be secondary sources. Biographies, so if you read a biography about Abraham Lincoln, that, for example, would be a secondary source. If it was an autobiography, it would be a primary source. Then we have commentaries. So somebody that's commenting on something would be a secondary source because they didn't actually experience it firsthand. Magazines, encyclopedias, because the people that wrote the encyclopedias weren't actually there to experience the events in the encyclopedias. So this would be an example of a primary or secondary source. Take a moment and figure it out. It's actually not, because it's a telefiction. Abraham Lincoln didn't actually hunt vampires. Great book, though. This biography would be a secondary source because Thomas Keneally wrote a biography about Abraham Lincoln. You have encyclopedias, secondary sources. Your textbooks, secondary sources. And this one here, you'd have to research a little bit more. Okay, it's a hidden history of World War II by Charles Glass. So this could be either a primary or a secondary source, but we need to further research it because he could have actually been in World War II, or he could have researched it and wrote about it. So you'd have to get more in depth on that one. Last but not least, how are primary and secondary sources different? Primary sources are original records created by first-hand witnesses of events. Secondary sources are documents, texts, images, and objects about an event created by someone who typically referenced the primary sources for information. Textbooks are an excellent example of a secondary source. Key thing to remember is both primary and secondary sources are credible research tools, so they're viable with whatever you're working on. And that should be it for primary and secondary sources. Hopefully you completed pages 2 and 4 in your notebook. So tomorrow in class we will basically discuss what we learned on the video today, and then we will actually work on our assignment. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Visit my webpage. You can find my email. I'll also give you the links for the video too. So you guys have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow in class.